I want to talk about November the 30th, but I want to start by thinking about June the 30th, the strike day that the NUT, ATL, PCS and UCU held together. There were many people in the movement who told us that strike wouldn't be successful. That strike exceeded our expectations enormously inside the NUT, and it's a lesson for all of us in the movement. We have recruited thousands of new members across the strike. We have hundreds of new reps who have come forward and are being trained. The pickets and the demonstrations on the day were younger and more female and blacker than our activist network. This was a real rebirth of our movement, a real chance for us to build something anew on June the 30th. And we have to take that lesson into November the 30th, that every expectation you have to challenge. It's possible to be broader, to find people who haven't ever thought they would work with us before who will now work with us. Teachers have historically thought of themselves as professional, a cut above the horny-handed sons of toil. Many of us have been in trades unions, but there's been that bit of an attitude. I think that we will see across the next few years and decades, teachers, nurses, other professionals feeling more and more like they are just workers and they have to respond just as workers do. For example, my mother was one of the first people ever privatised. She was a school dinner lady, a school cleaner with the two jobs that she had. And the privatisation for her, the same as privatisation for the vast majority of people who experienced it, meant working class women working longer for less. That's what their efficiency of privatisation is all about. But that threat of privatisation isn't constrained anymore to working class women who are cleaners and school dinner ladies. It's everybody in our entire class, teachers, lecturers, nurses, now all facing that direct threat of privatisation. So there is a real chance to talk to broader layers than we've ever talked to before in building for strike action. There is proof. The National Association of Head Teachers is a body which has never had a strike. It is an organisation of managers. They are balloting for discontinuous strike action for November the 30th. I forecast they'll win that ballot handsomely. And there is a breadth to the movement because of that. But I think not only do we have to look at how we spread within the public sector, we have to think on November the 30th about the wider layers that need to be drawn in. I think that the most effective attack that Cameron has on us, it is completely hypocritical and without foundation, but the most effective attack he has on us is when he says there is a sort of apartheid in our country and that public sector workers have got good pensions and private sector workers have got bad pensions. I say hypocritical because he's a member of the bloody Tory party that when he was a young student, the Federation of Conservative Students used to wear t-shirts that said "Hang Nelson Mandela." So for him and his party to try and give us lessons about apartheid stinks of hypocrisy. But more than that, because that's a little bit of a political point, more than that, his party and the Taxpayers Alliance, who also use this slur of apartheid, they represent the very companies that have slashed the private sector pensions in the first place. So they are the organisations, they're people like Robert Maxwell who stole money, like the companies who've taken long pensions holidays. They do nothing to defend private sector workers' pensions. If you look at the rich in the private sector, their pensions are okay, thank you very much. But it is true, there is a pensions crisis in our country. It's just not true that it's in the public sector. The pensions crisis is in the private sector, and our movement needs not just to defend public sector pensions, but to reach out and demand better pensions in the private sector. The attack on CPI, the change of indexation, applies to private sector workers as well. So we have to reach out to those private sector workers. We also have to reach out to the students. Because if people are made to work to 67, 68, imagine that. If you were recently a 14-year-old in school, imagine your class teacher being 68 and trying to keep control. It's a challenge, I think. But if people have to work to 68 or 70, which is what they're saying, that's more youth unemployment. The French students showed the way. They were joining in the demonstrations against the attacks on pensions in France, specifically saying this means more youth unemployment if people have to work longer. So stretch it out to the professionals, the NAHT, we want them involved. Stretch it out to the private sector workers. Stretch it out to the students. We all have something to gain from fighting and winning on November the 30th. And now, each one of you in this room, and everyone on the platform, needs to have a plan of action between now and November the 30th. If you're in a workplace, you need to be balloting, you need to be planning to get the best possible return in that ballot. When is your meeting? Who are you talking to? If you're not in one of those unions, I mean, are you organising a reps meeting in your area to get people together? What are you planning for November the 30th? Plan for the ballot, plan for the day of action. We have to make this the biggest thing that our country has seen for decades.
Yeah.